All right, today we're going to build a really clear framework for understanding the diverse and, pretty complex world of India's tribal communities. We'll get into who they are, how they live, and the unique challenges they're up against in the modern world. By the end, you'll have a solid grasp of this vital part of India's social fabric.
So let's just start with a number to get a sense of the scale we're talking about. Over 104 million people in India, that's 8.6% of the entire population, belong to what are called scheduled tribes. And listen, this isn't some single uniform group. We are talking about over 700 distinct communities. You have massive populations like the Gonds and Bhils, who number in the millions, all the way to what are called critically vulnerable groups, like the Great Andanes, who now have fewer than 50 people.
So to make sense of all this, here's how we're going to break it down. First up, we'll try to pin down what a tribe actually is. Then, we'll explore their incredible cultural diversity. After that, we'll dive into how their societies really function, their complex relationship with mainstream India, and finally, we'll look at the modern challenges they face and, importantly, how they're fighting back. Okay, so let's get right to it and start with the most fundamental question of all. What exactly is a tribe in the Indian context? I know it seems simple, but this definition has been debated for decades. And honestly, it's the key to understanding everything else we're going to talk about.
The official term you'll hear a lot is tribe, which, for the record, has colonial roots. But many communities themselves prefer the term Adivasi. And this is such a powerful word because it literally means original inhabitants, staking their claim as the indigenous people of the land. It just carries this deep sense of history and connection to their territory.
So to create a kind of working definition, anthropologists point to a set of common characteristics. As you can see here, these often include things like a distinct territory and a common language. A key feature is a social structure that's typically egalitarian, more equal, and organized around family ties or kinship instead of a rigid hierarchy. They also tend to be endogamous, meaning they marry within their group and use traditional technology for survival.
But, and this is a huge but, here's where it gets really interesting. This quote from the sociologist Andre Batel makes a crucial point. There's no such thing as an ideal tribe that perfectly fits every single one of those characteristics. For instance, the Sauras of Odisha actually have a social hierarchy, something we usually associate with the caste system. It's just a perfect reminder that these communities aren't frozen in time. They are dynamic and always changing.
And this diversity becomes even more obvious when we just look at where these communities live. Their geographical spread across India is really the key to understanding their incredibly varied cultures and ways of life.
We can basically group India's tribal communities into 7 main geographical zones, which cover about 15% of the country's land. Just think about it for a second. You have the pastoral Gujars in the Himalayas, the Nagas in the northeastern hills, the Santhals in the east, the Bhils in central India, and even the ancient Jarawas in the Andaman Islands. Each of these unique environments has given rise to a completely distinct culture.
And this is a brilliant illustration of how geography shapes culture. So in the western zone, you've got the Warli tribe of Maharashtra. Their iconic wall paintings are a perfect example. They use a really simple geometric style, circles, triangles, squares, to create these incredibly lively and beautiful scenes of daily life, rituals, and nature.
Okay, now let's jump over to the northeast. Here, an economic activity itself becomes a cultural cornerstone. Many communities practice what's known as jhum, or shifting cultivation. It's so much more than just farming. It's a sustainable practice that is deeply woven into their rituals and their festivals. It shows a truly symbiotic relationship with the forest.
All right, so we've seen the diversity between different tribal groups. Now let's kind of zoom in and look at what's happening inside these societies. How are they organized? What are these social, economic, and political principles that really guide their lives?
At the very heart of tribal social life are these 3 pillars. First, there's marriage, which has really strict rules, like you often have to marry outside your own clan, but stay within the larger community. Second is family. The nuclear family is the most common, partly for practical economic reasons. And finally, you have kinship. This is the web of family relationships that determines, everything, from who inherits land to your place in society, with most groups tracing their lineage through the father's side.
Their economies are also just fundamentally different from the mainstream. This slide shows the contrast perfectly. On the left, you see the tribal economy. It's subsistence-based, which means the goal is to meet the community's needs, not to rack up a profit. It's cooperative and deeply tied to the forest. This is, a world away from the competitive, profit-driven market economy we see on the right.
And what about law and order? Well, that's handled through what's called customary law. Look at that column on the left. This law isn't written down in books like modern state law is. It's passed down through tradition, and it's enforced by village elders. The goal isn't just punishment, it's about restoring harmony to the community. So instead of prison, you might see sanctions like a fine, or even social ostracism, systems that really only work in a close-knit society.
Of course, tribal societies don't exist in a vacuum. For centuries, they've been interacting with the dominant caste-based Hindu society. And to understand this really complex relationship, we need to talk about a key concept, the tribe-caste continuum. This idea completely flips the script on the notion that there's some hard wall separating tribe and caste. Instead, it suggests it's a fluid spectrum. The best way to think about it is like a porous boundary, where for centuries, culture, beliefs, and people have moved back and forth, influencing and changing each other. It's a two-way street, not a one-way absorption.
One very influential model for how this process works came from the anthropologist N.K. Bose. He called it the Hindu method of tribal absorption. And as you can see, it's basically a three-step process. It starts with contact, then moves to emulation, where the tribe starts to adopt Hindu customs to gain social status, and finally, it can lead to full integration into the caste system, though, importantly, often at a lower rank.
This long history of interaction brings us right into the modern day, where tribal communities are facing a whole new set of challenges. But this is also a story of incredible resilience and the fight to protect their identity and their rights.
The pressures of modern development have created some massive problems. Probably the biggest one is what's called development-induced displacement. You see, tribal lands are often rich in resources, so they become targets for dams, mines, and factories. This displacement, combined with losing their land to outsiders and losing access to the forests, has put their entire way of life under threat.
But, and this is so important to remember, they have never been passive victims. As this timeline shows, their resistance has evolved over time. Before independence, it was about fighting colonial exploitation. After independence, the focus shifted to demands for political autonomy. And today, the fight is often centered on resisting displacement and asserting their rights over their resources, what they call their Jal Jungle Zameen, or their water, forest, and land.
This resilience isn't just about protest. It's actually backed by the law. The Indian Constitution itself provides a framework of protection. It has special safeguards like the 5th and 6th schedules, which give autonomy to tribal areas, and more modern laws like the Forest Rights Act of 2006 give them powerful legal tools to protect their traditional rights and their way of life.
So, all of this leads us to a really critical question for the future. As India continues to develop and modernize, how can it balance that progress with protection? How can the rights, the culture, and the invaluable knowledge of its Adivasi communities be preserved, ensuring that they are partners in development and not its victims? That is the fundamental challenge we're left with.